Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of LANGERR at the Mic. We have some very exciting news today because this will be the first LANGERR at the Mic episode that will air on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You might also notice that we have a new logo, and that is many thanks and credit to my brother and graphic designer, Matthew Lang. And if this is your first time tuning in, then welcome to the show and thank you for listening. We'll bring some cool guest interviews as well as plenty of Dallas Cowboys and Montreal Canadiens talk your way. We'll also talk some fitness since I am a kinesiologist and personal trainer, and also talk some life in general. And whatever doesn't get posted on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can find on my YouTube channel. Check it out, LANGERR at the Mic. There are two R's in LANGER just because that was my nickname in hockey. And you can also hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at Mike Langer for both. So subscribe to my YouTube channel and send me a follow on Twitter and Instagram. And our guest today will be Hugh Burrill from Sportsnet 590 in Toronto. He will be on in a few seconds, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And here he is. He has done TVs for Sportsnet. He also co-hosts the golf show, and you could hear him on the morning every weekday morning on Sportsnet 590 in Toronto. He is my radio announcer, but if you take his betting advice, your odds will be in your favor. Maybe. He is Hugh Burrill. How are you today, Hugh?
How you doing, Mike? You make me sound really a lot busier than I am, really. Thank you for that. That's great. Never take betting advice from me. Trust me.
All right, at least you admit. But yeah, I know you give a lot of gambling advice and all that. So on your Twitter account, right, you can follow Hugh at Hugh Burrill. It's HUGHW.
Yep. Hugh W. Burrill.
Burrill. There you go. Yeah.
Yep.
So thank you so much for joining the show today, Hugh. And
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's get right into it. So let's start by talking a little bit of hockey here. Okay. Just confirm your favorite team, maybe not right now because I know as a broadcaster you have to be objective, right? But, your favorite team growing up was the Montreal Canadiens, correct?
Yeah. I'm a Habs fan. I grew up in the Ottawa Valley. This was before the Senators came back. And back then in the Valley, you were either a Leafs fan or a Habs fan. And my dad was a Habs fan, so I just by default was a Habs fan. And so I grew up with all those great teams with Guy Lafleur, Ken Dryden, Jacques Lemaire, Steve Shutt, Larry Robinson, Serge Savard. I could go on and on and on, but all you have to do is just open up a hockey history book and you understand why people cheered for those teams. They were just amongst the best to ever get on the ice in the NHL.
Yeah, you took well after your dad, I guess. But
yeah.
What would you say was like that season that you remember most as like growing up? Like what was it the '86 Stanley Cup or the '93 Stanley Cup? What do you remember the most?
It was probably '86 was great, but it was probably the '93 Stanley Cup. I had just moved to Toronto for a job in that spring, so I was working part-time, so I had a lot of downtime to watch hockey, and that was a pretty special playoff run by the Habs with all of the overtime victories. And you just knew that with Patrick Roy in net, if this game was going to overtime, Montreal was going to win. Would they have like 10 overtime victories that playoff? So it was a foregone conclusion they were going to win, and they were a good team. They weren't a great team, but they just kind of caught lightning in the bottle. They got helped a little bit when the Penguins went out, for sure. And I would have liked to have seen them play the Leafs in the final, but we'll take a 5-game victory over the Kings as well. So
yeah, and if the Leafs had beat if the Leafs had beat the Habs in that Stanley Cup final, we would never hear the end of it. So it played out well, thankfully.
No, they'd still be partying in the streets of Toronto, I think.
Oh yeah, 100%. But like Montreal Canadiens fans are still partying right now in St. Catherine. But
yeah.
But let's also actually bring it now to 2020. So I know you have your show every morning on Sportsnet, and I'm sure you talk. I know you talk a lot of Blue Jays, of course, but I'm sure you also talk, Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL offseason. So
we talk everything.
There you go. Exactly. Golf and F1 racing, everything, of course. So give me your initial thoughts on this offseason that the Montreal Canadiens have had so far.
Yeah, you're right. We talk a lot of hockey on leadoff with Ziggy and Scotty Mac, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. It's been just like the regular season or the irregular season, we're calling it. It's been a kind of a wacky last couple of months here for hockey and its fans. The bubble worked. I mean, and I have to admit that when they first floated this idea, I had my doubts of whether or not it was going to work, but they pulled it off brilliantly. Now, in terms of the off season, it's like everything got done in terms of free agency, like in the first day or two. Most of the big names were signed. The Habs were pretty busy. They made some nice moves, I think. Now, does the addition of Tyler Toffoli and Josh Anderson, does that make them cup contenders? I don't know. The jury's still out there. I mean, Carey Price is going to have a lot to say about that, but it's nice that they got a guy like Jake Allen to kind of take some of the pressure off or take some of the workload off a guy like Carey Price, because he's probably been playing too much hockey for this team over the last few years. So it'd be nice to give him a bit of a break and keep him a little more fresh than he has been for the playoffs.
Yeah, I did. I looked it up. I think it was about 6 or 7 of the last 10 years where he's played over like 59 games in a season for Carey Price. But what I'm looking at, I mean, I really like the Toffoli signing. For me, it's the 7 years to Josh Anderson. Again, love the player. That's a big need for the Canadiens, but the term 7 years, that's going to be a gamble. We'll see how that turns out.
Well, I mean, and when you hear a term like that, 7 years, maybe that deal's not happening if the term isn't 7 years. Maybe that's what he wanted for that price, and perhaps the Habs weren't willing to go any higher in terms of money. Maybe they throw another year or two on the back end to make it happen. But you're right. I like the player. I like the player of 2 years ago. Let's hope we're not getting the Josh Anderson from last year, where it was an injury-plagued year and he had 1 goal. We're looking for a couple of years ago when he set career high. I think he had 27 goals. I believe that
27,
was
27. Yeah, like 49 points or something.
Yeah, so let's hope it's that guy. And if it is, you're right. He's a physical presence. He's not the biggest player in the world, but he's got good size, and it looks like he's not afraid to use it. And that's something. Well, let's face it, the Habs have been lacking here lately. They've got some good, young, talented players, but none of whom you'd call a power forward. And so it's nice to have a guy like this.
I'm going to make a bold statement right now, Hugh, and I want you to give me your feedback on this. So one of those young players, his name is Nick Suzuki. Yeah. And right now I did this research as well, but a case can be made that one day Nick Suzuki will be as good as Braden Point. Why, you ask? Because 20-year-old...
That would be my question, why?
Why? Because if you look at their production in junior, and if you look at Braden Point as a 20-year-old versus Nick Suzuki as a 20-year-old, then they're in a very similar category right now. So obviously it's a very, very small sample size, I'm going to have to ask our friend Zach Pencer with the analytic data to see if that supports it or not. But what do you think about that?
That you're right. That is a very bold statement. And if that can come to fruition, that would be amazing for Habs fans everywhere. However, a guy like Point also plays alongside, a guy like Kucherov, and there's a lot of talent surrounding Braden Point. Now, I'm not sure if Nick Suzuki has the supporting cast that Braden Point has in Tampa, but we'll see, right? I was so impressed by him, especially in the playoffs. It was kind of almost his coming out party a little bit in the playoffs. He and Kasperi Kotkaniemi as well. So it was nice to see.
For sure. And let's actually go back a couple years now, because I want to now talk about you're with us on the show today, and I really appreciate that. So I want to talk about your experiences in broadcasting. So
there've been a few.
Yeah, so let's go right back to that. You covered the Canadiens Tampa Bay series in 2015, correct?
Yes, I did, and I was working for Sportsnet, the TV side at the time, and we did it kind of in a different kind of way. There were 2 reporters, 2 of us covering the series, but the other guy did the games in Tampa Bay, covered the games in Tampa Bay, and I covered the games in Montreal. So when the series switched to Montreal, it was a regular work day. You go to morning skate. you file a report, you go back to the hotel for an hour or two, then you go back to the rink, you get ready, you do your pregame hit, you watch the game, you do your postgame hit and chat and all that kind of stuff, and then you go home. But when the series switched to Tampa Bay, my job, and I use job like in air quotes here, my job was basically to go to a popular Montreal bar and watch the game with a bunch of crazy Habs fans. And we had a camera locked off, and we'd get the reaction. We'd do, like, every time they scored, we'd interview some people. We'd do like a post game kind of party report. It was a lot of fun. It was a different way to do it.
Yeah, and so you were there for, like, in the bars at the time. I mean, I guess it was 2015 and 2017 that we really had like a full playoff experience in
Yeah.
Montreal. Obviously, this past year in 2020 in the bubble was a playoff experience, but it wasn't the same, obviously,
No, it
as we
wasn't
got
the
in
same.
April. But what would you say are some of your best stories or fun stories within, covering the Canadiens in that series?
Well, let me first talk about just the atmosphere in Montreal, in the city of Montreal during a playoff run. If you've never experienced it, it's pretty special. The the air just kind of crackles with excitement leading up to puck drop, and everybody there is a hockey expert, from the cabbie to the doorman at the hotel to the bartender at the restaurant that you're having dinner at. Everybody knows so much. There's a good chance that the average person there knows more than you do about the team, because you're kind of parachuted in to cover it. It wasn't my regular beat. I was usually with the Maple Leafs, but just the excitement in Montreal, it was palpable. Like, you could just feel it and sense it. I can only imagine what it would ever be like if Montreal ever played Toronto in the playoffs. I mean, that, and in both cities, it would just be absolutely off the hook in terms of excitement. But I remember, just the overall, aside from the overall feeling of covering that series, there was the one of the bars were at one of the nights. They had a mechanical bull. So in between periods, they had, ride the mechanical bull contests. And no, I didn't get up on the bull. I took no part of that. It's tough to do that, wearing a suit and tie. But it was fun watching everybody. And let's just say the rides were a lot better during the first intermission than they were during the second intermission, if you know what I say. That's an extra hour or so to do some drinking. So it got a little loose toward the end of the game.
And then, especially, I guess, if there was, I think there was an overtime for one of those two games back then.
I can't remember. Yeah, yeah. So I can just imagine. Yeah,
But yeah,
but
I mean, like,
inside, sorry,
yeah,
Mike.
go ahead.
Inside the building it's unlike anything I've covered in terms of sports, and just the volume level inside the Bell Center, like pre-game, like during warm-ups, the crowd is just ramped up. You literally can't hear yourself speak. I'd lean over before our pre-game hit, I'd lean over to the camera guy, and I'd basically have to yell in his ear to be understood. Now, it's a good thing we had a microphone, so we didn't have to scream that loud. But it was just amazing. It was incredible. What an atmosphere.
And I feel, just because Montreal is, hockey's, the Canadiens are the only thing that we have in Montreal right now. I mean, yeah, the Impact, yeah, the Alouettes, but they don't compare. It's not like we have
No,
the Blue Jays or the Raptors or anything like that.
no.
So absolutely, like, and especially because Montreal is a bit of a much more dense and smaller city than Toronto
Yep.
is. Like, yeah, just I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it.
It's a very
Remembering,
passionate city. It loves its Habs. It always has. It always will. And that's why you hear a lot of players talk about how it's the best and worst place to
Oh
play.
yeah, because then if you don't perform, like if Josh Anderson or Tyler Toffoli don't pan out, then Habs Twitter right away, and Habs fans will be all over them. But
on the flip side of that, if you're doing well, there's no fan base that loves you more, and
oh yeah,
you're
PK
you're the
Subban.
king of the city. Yeah.
So like we can talk hockey all day and agree with each other for the most part, but here's something that we will likely disagree on, because
Okay.
yesterday you just told me that you're a Washington football fan, correct?
Yeah, unfortunately, I am, but I come by it honestly. I mean, I kind of, where I grew up, I mean, our cable package showed a lot of Washington football games, so I became enamored with John Riggins. He was the running back for Washington, Joe Theismann, the quarterback, the Hogs, that absolutely incredible, huge offensive line. So yeah, so 3 Super Bowls. We had a lot of great times, and now we're not having such great times. I'm glad that they're getting rid of that stupid nickname. I love the team, but I always had it, the nickname always kind of made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. And I haven't said it on the air probably in about 3 years now. Um, but I'm
That's
glad
impressive.
that's changing. Yeah. Yeah. And I would have thought by now it would have slipped out once or twice just by accident, but so far it hasn't. But they're a team. I think they're hitting rock bottom now, and hopefully they're starting to rebound a little bit. But the rivalry between my team and that dish rag you have hanging in the background there, it's
Dallas
one of the great
Cowboys one.
it's one of the greatest rivalries in sport. We talked about a little bit about Montreal and Toronto and hockey. How about Washington and Dallas in football? The Yankees, Red Sox. These are such great rivalries for sport, and it's nice to be part of that.
Yeah, and what name would you go with for your franchise
Well,
going into
if
next year? What would
you
you
want to
say?
do the easy one, like why not call them the Warriors? I mean, they've already got kind of the W as their de facto logo. Just call them the Warriors. Uh, I mean, owner Daniel Snyder, he likes money, so you can make a heck of a lot more money just by rebranding, selling new jerseys, selling ball caps, whatever you want. Call them the Washington Warriors. It's a cool name.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in Washington, you got to keep it political, which to me, as a
Yeah.
fan of the Cowboys and, being rivals with the Washington at the time Redskins, now football team. And by the way, like going back to that, like even NFL networks, anchors and reporters for NFL Network, ESPN, they always let it slip every now and then.
Yeah,
Maybe they
it
correct
happens,
themselves,
right?
but
They've been called that name for so like back from the 30s or whatever.
oh
So
yeah. And as
yeah,
a
you'll
Cowboys
slip out
fan,
once in a while.
yeah, and just as a fan of the Cowboys, it's like, it's something that we can shame and ridicule that franchise for being
Yeah,
the NFL team of the capital of the United States and have such a god awful like racist name like that.
yeah,
But
it is.
again,
Yeah, it's indefensible. Like, and
yeah.
it has been defended for so long. And yeah, there's a part of me that doesn't feel good about that. Yeah.
But that being said, though, like in terms of finding a new name, like I like Warriors, I like the idea in terms of rebranding and all that. But I think it just has to be something political, of course, if you're going to be in Washington D.C. But let me ask you this though. So right now, by the way, the Washington football team has two very cool stories, and Ron Rivera coaching through his battle with cancer, and Alex Smith coming back from his devastating broken leg from
Yeah.
multiple breaks in his leg a
Yeah.
couple of years ago in 2018. So who do you think is really in a better place right now as a franchise? Do you think the Washington football team right now, with their whole situation, at least playing with the inspiration of Ron Rivera and Alex Smith, or the Dallas Cowboys right now, who Alex Smith comes back, but then Dak Prescott suffers just a
Yeah.
devastating leg injury, and this team was supposed to be a Super Bowl contender, but right now is 2-3,
Yeah.
and just has no defense and is down there starting quarterback for the rest of the season. So who's in a better state right now for 2020? Who do you think?
That's a $64 question, isn't it? And and even as a Washington fan, it killed me to see Dak Prescott go down with that horrible injury. You never ever like to see that. Even though I hate the Cowboys with every fiber of my being, Dak Prescott, by all accounts, seems like a good kid, and he'll come back. I think he'll be okay. But getting back to your question, that's a tough one. Remember a few years, it wasn't so long ago. Remember a few years where both the Habs and the Leafs sucked? They were both just terrible hockey teams. That's what we're
2012.
seeing. Yeah, around that era. That's what we're seeing now with Washington and Dallas, two of the absolute tentpole foundation teams of the NFL, and they're both kind of just scuffling along. But if I had to choose, I'd rather be Dallas right now. Yeah, they're having their issues, but at least they seem like they have, when Dak returns healthy, at least they seem like they have a bona fide NFL quarterback. He was putting up record numbers before he went down. And so the problem with Dallas isn't their offense. They don't know how to stop the run. They don't know how to
They
prevent.
don't want to stop anything. Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt.
they
They
don't know
don't
how to
want to
prevent
stop
the other
anything.
team from completing a pass. So if they can get that figured out, they'll be okay. But right now, Washington has to build up everything. They don't score, but at least they can't stop other teams from scoring.
Well, you can. I mean, I really like the front seven there, led by Chase Young and especially Ron
Yeah.
Rivera as a defensive coach. So at least the defense is there. But again, just like you said, quarterback. I don't know if Dwayne Haskins is gonna be the guy
No.
going forward.
Well,
Like
he's already demoted to what, third string now behind Alex
pretty
Smith.
much.
Yeah,
And Kyle Allen. So
and Kyle Allen. So yeah, it's been a pretty short ride for Dwayne Haskins. Maybe he can kind of rejuvenate his career somewhere else, but right now it doesn't look like it's going to be in Washington.
So we have a couple of minutes left here. So we can't go this long talking with someone from Sportsnet and not talk about the Blue Jays here. So,
Okay.
but before we talk about the Blue Jays, so you growing up in the Ottawa Valley.
Yep.
Were you a fan of the Jays or the Expos?
You know what? I can to this day I can ring off the starting lineup of the 1981 Montreal Expos. I was a huge Expos fan. Gary Carter, Tim Raines, Andre Dawson, Ellis Valentine, Warren Cromartie, Chris Spire, Larry Parrish, Tim Wallach, all those guys, Steve Rogers, Woody Fryman. That was the team that I kind of grew up with, and for years, actually until I all the way through college, I think I carried a Tim Raines baseball card in my wallet. I really should have put that away. It might have been worth something, but instead it just got all ripped up and everything. But yeah, I was an Expos fan. But the year I moved to Toronto in '93 was the year that the Jays won their second World Series. So '93 was a good year for me in terms of sports. The Habs won the Stanley Cup and the Blue Jays won the World Series. But how can you not be a fan of this team right now? They're so exciting. And I know they made the playoffs this year. It was a 60-game schedule, and if it was a full schedule, they likely would not have made the postseason. But that doesn't mean that they weren't taking steps in the right direction. I mean, Bo Bichette, Kevin Biggio, Vladdy Jr., Lourdes Gurriel. These are young players you can really be excited about. And I think if they can just, I mean, like every team is saying this, if they can just get a little bit of pitching, they'll be okay. Well, but it's true for the Jays because I don't think they have a problem scoring runs. I think they have a problem, preventing, not preventing runs, but they have a problem on the mound, and everybody has to get better at that.
And also, I feel like they also struggled with a lot of base running discipline this year, right? So, I mean, yeah, they're a young team, of course, and they're just learning how to win.
I mean, as frustrating as it is for us as fans, you can imagine being a coach in that dugout. You can imagine being Charlie Montoyo or some of his bench coaches, seeing his players run through signs, seeing his players run into double steals, being the final out of the inning at third base. But these are growing pains. These are the types of things that Jays fans are going to have to endure to get to where they want to be. And where they want to be is back. Well, on the day that we're recording this, it's the 5-year anniversary of the Jose Bautista bat flip. So we want to get back to that kind of excitement. And I was at Rogers Center covering that game. And you talk about not being able to hear yourself speak. Oh my God. In that 7th inning, I thought the roof was going to come off in the 7th inning of that game.
Yeah. Would you say that's your favorite Blue Jays moment working for Sportsnet and covering the Jays?
That favorite Blue Jays moment, absolutely, for sure. But I was lucky enough to cover in 2014 the National League Championship Series and the World Series between the Kansas City Royals and the San Francisco Giants. And to be in the locker room after the Giants won the World Series and to be covered in champagne and just reeking of it, but just to hear the players are rejoicing at this great accomplishment, their 3rd World Series in 5 years, and to kind of be a small part of that, or at least to be an observer to that. That was probably the highlight of my baseball career for sure.
So excellent. And coming back to this Blue Jays team right now, so do you think that they can be a 500 team or better in a 162 game season if we get one, which we might not next year? We have no idea what MLB will look, what Major League Baseball will look like next year. But if there is a 162 game season next year, how do you think this Blue Jays team will perform in that season?
I think at best you can maybe be knocking on the door of a wild card spot. If Major League Baseball keeps the same number of teams in the playoffs as they are. I think that's the plan, to keep the playoffs expanded a little bit. I think that the Jays have a legitimate shot at one of the wild card spots. They're not winning the division, not with the Yankees there, not with Tampa Bay there. But they're going to have to do it kind of through the back door. But once you get in, right? Look at the Dallas Stars this year in the NHL playoffs. And they were kind of not great heading into the postseason, and they made it all the way to the final. So that's what the Jays are going to have to hope for.
But one of those guys that they're going to be relying on, and this is, again, we're going to have a lot of people from Montreal watching the show. And as you know, you growing up an Expos fan yourself, obviously you are.
Hi, everybody in Montreal, for watching.
Yes. But thank you. But yeah, just talk a little bit about about Vlad Guerrero Jr. and the year that he had. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't at the same level he was the last couple of years. He had a 262 batting average, 9 home runs, and a .97 on base plus slugging. So was this just like an anomaly down kind of year for Vlad Jr., or what do you think of it?
Here's the problem, Mike, with hype. Very, very few players live up to it. And with that much hype for Vladdy Jr. coming into the major leagues, with his dad being who his dad is, just a Hall of Fame player, how was he ever going to live up to that hype? Yes, Vladdy Jr. can hit the bejesus out of a baseball, absolutely. But we saw his defensive liabilities at third base, so much so that they quickly moved him over to first base. And it's growing pains for him there right now. He has to learn a whole new position. Hitting, and we saw kind of some of his struggles in his sophomore year this year, pounding balls into the dirt, grounding into double plays, grounding out all the time. Well, it's one thing to knock the cover off the ball in Double-A and Triple-A. That's great. But when you get to the major leagues, everybody is as good as you are. And you see this in the NHL a lot. A superstar coming out of junior ends up being a pretty mediocre player, at least for the first couple of years, until he kind of gets his feet under him. You're seeing this with Vladdy Jr. Big league pitchers are pretty smart. They know that all you have to do with him is stop feeding him fastballs, throw the odd changeup, give him a breaking ball, and it's into the dirt, and you're out of the inning. So these are things that he's going to have to learn.
Yeah, and I was just while you were saying that, I was just confirming his how old he is. He's still 21 years old. He's
only a kid.
Yeah, he's barely legal to drink in the U.S. So
yeah, I mean, most 21-year-olds in a system in baseball, they're not even at the major league level yet. Well, he's already had 2 years at the major league level. So you just got to be patient with him. Will he be the type of player that everybody wants him to be? Will he be his dad? No, he's not going to be. But I don't think he's going to be a great player. I think he's going to be a good player. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. But I think Bo Bichette has quickly kind of surpassed him as the young leader of this team. And you talk about a guy that's exciting to watch. It's Bo for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much again, Hugh, for joining the show. I always I want to ask one more question. We always end my show with predictions. So
all right
now we got the Braves and the Dodgers in the NLCS, and the Rays and the Astros in the ALCS, the hated Astros. But who is your pick for the World Series?
The Trastros, you mean? Obviously, I mean, I'm not really going on a limb here, but I think it's going to be the Rays and Braves, and I think it's going to be the Rays. I think it's the Rays' year. I think they've got enough pitching. They can get enough hitting as well. I think it's the Rays.
So you're telling me. So you're telling me right now that if the Tampa Bay Rays, if it wasn't for the COVID-19 pandemic, we would have a Major League Baseball team from Montreal winning the World Series this year, or half from Montreal winning the World Series this year.
Nah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing. I mean, if the Rays can somehow win a World Series, I mean, I don't know what that does for their future in Tampa and or Montreal, but it'll be interesting to see. I mean, just as someone cheering for the Expos, and as a lot of people that will be cheering for the Expos who listen to the show, we can't help but wonder what if the Rays were the Expos or were a Montreal franchise right now. But
yeah, nobody wants baseball back in Montreal more than me, but I think it's going to be later than sooner for that to happen.
Hey, we'll see. I mean, I know that there's a whole a team of it's Charles Bronfman as his son is leading the charge there in
Yeah.
Montreal with Bell Media and all that. So hey, we'll see how that ownership group can somehow bring the Rays out of Tampa into Montreal. But
Hey, fingers crossed. It'd be pretty tough to steal a World Series champion team out of the city, but hey, you never know, right?
we'll see, exactly. So, hey, thank you so much again for Hugh. Once again, you could follow Hugh Burrill of Sportsnet 590 on Twitter at Hugh W. Burrill. That is 2 R's and 2 L's. And I am Mike Langer. You know that. And if you like my content, you can subscribe to my channel. Give us a big thumbs up on this video. This has been a Langer at the Mic, our first episode on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you again next time.